Hello, everyone. It's me, JP Warren, coming at you from the NOV. What is it? Spring Ed Technology. I'm not going to remember that until probably the third or fourth one that we do, but that's okay. We're not here to talk about where I'm at. We're here to talk about human trafficking and sex trafficking. It's a very heavy subject, but it doesn't have to be if you start engaging in it. We just filmed one block, and here's our second one. We're going to dive a little bit more into that. So before we begin again, my name is JP Warren, and let's go ahead and introduce ourselves around the room.
I'm David Reed, the founder of redM and an employee of NOV.
And I'm Jess Brassington, and I help on the leadership team with redM.
All right. Well, I guess let's get this kicked off. And in reality, this is kind of a simple question, but it's a very complex answer. We discussed the grooming of children, of teenagers, of your own children, or stuff that you see. So my question is this: how are people groomed? I mean, we were at a gala not that long ago, the redM Gala, and it was very wonderful. But one thing that popped out in my mind that was very moving to me and very hit home was the fact that I think someone mentioned there was about 4 or 5 oil and gas executives, C-suite level, when their children were groomed, when their children were brought into this tragic situation. So let's talk about this. How are people groomed? I mean, as a parent, I'm coming from a father perspective right now. So how are people groomed? How are our children groomed?
Well, and there's several different ways, but we've said before too, a lot of people, when they do discover sex trafficking, they think it's what you see in the movies, and doesn't mean that can't be something that happens, but there's so many layers to that and different approaches that someone can take for that. So something that, just speaking to you as a father of a child, there's something where they are sexually grooming children, and this could be through social media. It could be through relationships.
What do you mean sexually grooming children through social media? Like, what does that look like?
So that's something where someone has access to your child. And remember, from a child's perspective, they don't understand that an adult can be manipulative and that they're really going towards their vulnerabilities and they're exploiting that. So say, for example, your child's on one of these gaming things, right, and adults have access to them. Well, to that child, they're like, oh, cool. This is a, whatever it is, 30-year-old man on here, and that's awesome. And they're playing. Well, that adult is looking for information from that child, and they may not come out and say, who are you? Where do you live? Do you like your parents?
Right.
They're going to do it in a way that builds trust. And they're very good at getting from that child kind of, okay, what's your home life like? What are you going through right now? So that's one way it can be done. Another is through relationships. A lot of times it's referred to as a Romeo. So if that is a man who is lavishing gifts on a teen, or they're going through problems with their parents and they're kind of like, hey, that's not right, or they do that and it's more of a relationship. So that's another one. David, you want to expand on that a little bit more? Or
yeah,
go ahead.
Go.
I want to get there, but the thing is though that I kind of want to go back to or address about this. There's a difference between a teenage relationship, a romance thing where it's like, oh, I don't like that guy, and all, versus someone that's being groomed. So I guess the signs of being groomed is isolation, it's love bombing, it's gifts, it's these grand gestures to lavish them with all these gifts with the goal to isolate them.
Well, and the method of isolation. So a parent doing their regular job is going to be trying to manage the growth of a young human, which means there'll be certain things that they, let's not do that, let's not do this. Yeah, you're trying to guide them as best you can.
Right.
They're going through the natural development where they're wanting to be separate. So they're starting to have this sense of, I need to be separate, because it is natural for them to want to be separate. So the traffickers are looking for that. They're looking for, where's the wedge between you and them? And so they're using social media, whatever, relationship, whatever it is. They're searching for what's the thing that really bothers them about their parents. What's the thing that gets them in trouble with their siblings? So they're listening, but then they're playing it back to them. And it makes a human being fall in love when someone is mirroring and just giving you all the things you feel hurt about. They're going in and saying, yeah, that is right. You should be hurt. They shouldn't be restricting you. you're smarter than that. You're like an adult. I'm older and I can see you. And so they do all those things. So you're looking for that kind of behavior happening. And what it looks like, which works for the traffickers, is it looks like just a troubled teen. Looks like any old troubled teen who's got a boyfriend or a relationship or a girlfriend that's causing them to separate from the family. It happens all the time. You get runaways, you get unhappy teens. Unhappy teens is also just teens. They're struggling. And so it can look like normal, which is what they want. So when it happened for some of the guys in the oil industry, they didn't know what was coming. One story was this girl was grounded. And so she says, okay, she's 16-year-old. She says, I'm going to the gym. And then that just takes a long time. And eventually they have a tracker device and they go, well, she's at the gym still. And eventually as time goes on, they go to the car and see the phone is in the car and she's not there. And that's how it began, and they didn't know there's another person in this relationship. Eventually they went into the software on the phone and tracked down the story of what happened. We're able to track the relationship and go, okay, this is the person. And
so what's scary about that to me, I know we didn't talk about this before we started recording. I mean, you hear, you're using the word, human trafficker. I'm thinking about this. I'm thinking, gold chain, like, like I have this stereotype image in my mind right now.
Yes.
Okay.
You'd be surprised.
And so that's kind of what I if we can, I would love to discuss that a little bit, because right now I have this like mafia dude smoking a cigarette with a gold chain and like
it's everything you can imagine, from a nice old lady to a pastor of a church to anything you can imagine. They find methods, and sometimes what happens, you have to remember, these are dark and powerful people who can manipulate people to do things, and so if they can trap and use you to be the conduit, they'll do that. So people get caught in it, and so there are the scary people who look like the scary people, but generally they're trying to be camouflaged at all times, and so they're looking for things that look normal.
Okay.
And so it doesn't look like what you think. So it's hard, because anytime you move us into, now I'm unnerved and I can't trust anybody, like, okay, great. But it just means you're starting to look for people who are separating your kids from you.
Start to look for signs. It's not a question of don't trust anyone, because you need to trust people in this world. You need to be kind to people in this world.
You can't live that way. You can't be paranoid.
No, you
all
can't.
the time.
But the thing is, though, you're right. It's learning about the subject and learning about certain things that gives you the light to look for these red flags.
Right.
And let's talk about red flags real quick.
Yeah.
What kind of red flags, for me as a father, what kind of red flags am I looking for if I'm noticing my child, whether it's go online, or what kind of red flags am I looking for at the house and also out in public?
I would say for you, because of the age of your child, if she were online, say, she's on Roblox or whatever it might be, if you start noticing a change in behavior, and once again, it goes back to preteen and teen. I have a preteen, and a lot of times, my husband and I are like, it's happening, she's one of them now. She's starting to be one of them, meaning our teens, So there are things that will start changing, but you'll know when it's a drastic change in behavior. I've known for a lot of people, sometimes they'll start, maybe they're scared to sleep, at night, or they're starting just to exhibit different things. And once again, talk to your children. Don't wait until these things progress and then go like you're accusing them of anything.
And you mentioned something about relationships before we actually started filming this, and how it's crucial to have these relationships with your children.
Yeah, and dads. So
yes,
we could do a whole episode, of maybe we will, just on dads.
I love that.
Yeah.
But because when the first time we did an event with redM, someone asked the question, where's this coming from? And Dennis, who was at Redeemed at the time, said, it's dads. Like, it's all dads. Like the source. And you're like, what? Yeah. It was an interesting perspective of like, that's the source of the challenge. But the relationships, the relationship between a father and children needs to get better. How they connect, what they do, even understanding how with a daughter, how to be, how to grow them healthily, and because you are the projection of, their future spouse or whatever. And with same with boys, is developing a healthy relationship where things are talked about. But what you're going to need as a tool is relationships, so that they will talk. and tell you things. And so that balance between being shocked by the things they might be doing, and being allowed access into that part of their life, because secrecy is the challenge, and
Yes.
teens are going to be secret, as it's natural for them. But having that separation conversation, that past 12 into 13, now you're on a separation road. This is a gap between us that's going to happen. Whereas some people try and think, I'll just clamp it down, and that way, I can stop them from doing everything. But what all that does is that tension still exists, and it causes them to,
It's going to blow up
they
then.
blow much further away. And so what you're having to do is give them more rope, but do it in a way that's open and where they're talking. So when they leave you, they're coming back and talking about their experience. And so for girls, that's highly possible. It's very plausible. For boys, it's quite hard to get them to talk, and so learning how to have conversations with your kids is the biggest deterrent you can have. Because for me, my daughter, we went on dates since she was 3, and we changed them every time, and they were always different. And years later, her first boyfriend wasn't till she was 20 or 21. And so afterwards, I said, I didn't really like this guy, and because she'd ask me, what do you think? And I'm like, don't ask me. You're ready. You know
Yeah.
what to do. And afterwards, I said, I didn't like him. And she goes, what? Why didn't you tell me? I said, because I trust you. Remember all those things we did together, all those dates we went on? Was he like that? Oh no, that's too hard. But I said, I was teaching you what it will feel like. She said, nobody can meet that. There is someone.
Exactly. I love that.
But I think
That's
that
good.
So we talked about the relationship between the parents and children and all that stuff. Now let's talk about the red flags. Kind of, I'm driving around the city. I'm driving around Houston. All right, I'm going to place to eat. I'm doing that. What are some of the red flags that people can start? I mean, I hate being this way, but not even use as a game, but as to kind of maybe an exercise. Next time they're out with their
Yes.
families and just they start noticing stuff, like what are some red flags that people can notice when they're out in their everyday lives that they can just start kind of noticing and being cognizant of things?
Well, I know something that we learned, and I didn't even think to look before. So, for example, after learning this, of course, you're like, oh, yes, I saw that and thought it was odd. Even for women, or I guess it could be a teen, in this case, if they're going to an appointment or getting their nails done. I've seen this several times in the nail place I go to, and the boyfriend's right there. Won't give them privacy. They never go to the restroom alone or anything like that. Or if, sad to say, but if they have bruising or different things. So those are things.
And controlling, usually
very
someone
controlling.
close by who's being controlling. That's
And I've seen that. Once I learned that at the nail place that I go to and take my girls to, I've seen several women there, and the boyfriend's always there, and he pays, they never pay, and he's like right by their side. And so just something like that to think, okay, well, that was a little, odd. Or places that you go. This is more, I guess, on the labor trafficking side. I used to go to a massage place, and I thought just something wasn't right, but this was years ago. But now I know when you walk in, there's a wall there. You can't see anything in the back. So those are some signs that you can look for.
Yeah.
It's closed
things
off.
that are, if you suspect something, certainly a massage place that's open after 10, it's a pretty sure thing.
Right.
It's not, but also not assuming all massage places, because there are people who legitimately do
Right.
this. Because what you can get some race issues here where people are like, oh, it's an Asian place, that's trafficking, and it's not. There are people who are legitimately
Right.
doing those things, but if there are cameras, that's always a sign. When there's cameras or there's locked doors, closed spaces, even if it looks like people are living there, because often internationally trafficked, they will keep them in the space. So if it looks like they live there as
Live
well,
where they work, right?
you can look around the back, and if there's barbed wire, there are things you can go, So ever since I've known about this, I'll
It
always
keeps you.
want to look around the back and go, okay, because you can see, and then you can call it in, and I think those signs, for international trafficking, people who don't speak English well and seem a bit disorientated, and you can see a number of them. Like if you're in a restaurant and they seem to be really lost,
Right.
and then there's a guard type person. So anything that you can see
It doesn't
in that
feel
space.
right.
And I know when we've had survivors live with us, when we're driving around, they'll show because there's a surprising amount of U.S. Kids who are in trafficking, but there's usually someone close by. So they because it's a with the U.S. kids, it's usually a mental trap. It's not a physical trap. So we were describing physical things there, which clearly show you trafficking, but it's a mental trap. So they have scary people nearby, but not right next to them.
So let me ask you a question. I mean, we're talking about relationships with your family right now. You're talking about going out in the community and kind of having a fresh set of lens on you. What's the call to action here? What would, I guess, what can people take home after watching this to their houses and to their communities? What can they do?
I would say, for starting with your home and your children, start that conversation like you would maybe as a newer parent. That was me, even if it was about bodies and sex in a healthy way, right? I share that on my podcast several times. It's something, unfortunately, people don't want to talk about sex even in a healthy way. So what happens is we don't talk about it. We don't talk about our bodies. We don't talk about sex. And then maybe until something really bad happens, we talk about it. I would say just start those conversations. Not, there's bad people and they might take you and rape you and kill you. You know, that's probably not the best way to approach it with your child, but start talking to them about what is acceptable behavior. Just like David was saying with his daughter, make it to where this is how it feels to be, you know, how a person should treat you. So I would say, if you had to start somewhere, have conversations with your child just about those things.
Yeah.
Hey, you know, you can always come to me and talk to me about something, even if it's uncomfortable, we'll get through it. Just starting that before you start thinking, my child, I think someone talked to them on their gaming thing and you're just gonna have to put your phone away and get off that. I just don't think, for me, that's not the best approach to be reactive. You always want to start that conversation early.
Because that's empowering. I mean, you're empowering your children to, I mean, look, you take away this, you take away that, you hide this, take the Wi-Fi away, they're going to find a way. You know what I mean? You're not really handling anything besides controlling them.
Right.
If you empower your children so they are comfortable having these conversations, they are comfortable with their bodies, and they're all are comfortable with what's right, what feels good, red flags, and what's normal. Kind of like taking your daughter on a date since she was 3 years old, which I love, by the way.
Yeah.
It's empowering your children.
And I will say real quick, with my youngest, she's 12, she has a phone, and she's the youngest of 5 total, but she came to me and said, Mom, someone sent me this text and I saw something on there. And I said, okay, let's look at it. And it was a link. And in my head, I'm thinking, you know, if this were my early parenting days, I'd have been like, oh my gosh, why'd you do that? What were you thinking? We looked at the link and it was spam, of course, but a girl like lifting her shirt up and then she exposed her breast on the link. But instead of me yelling at my daughter and freaking out about it, we just had that discussion. You know, you don't open things from people you don't know. Thank you so much for coming and showing me this. Even though as a parent, I was so upset that my daughter had seen that. I think really keeping your calm about you and sticking to what is the purpose of this is going to help. And it's going to help you go so much further with your children because the next time, if you scare them, they're going to say, oh, I'm not going to go to you.
Oh, absolutely.
So really just saying, hey, thank you for showing me this. Even if it is something they've gotten into a little, they shouldn't have done things maybe on gaming or they were up too late or something. Always just let them know they can come to you and you'll get through something.
And you want them as they get older because they may not come to you with stuff, and that's going to be normal because they're in that separation path. But you want to know that they've got inside of them what they need. You know, that they've got the tools, and so you can observe that and have conversations about it. But as years go on, you know, there comes a certain point where you're like, all right, I'm not holding the bike anymore while you're trying to cycle for the first time, and they don't know you're there, but you're watching going, okay. But I think that observing for patterns and you know, and when it goes wrong, which it can do because they're human beings, and like I say, people don't choose cults, they just start going down that road. It's the never forgetting to love them, you know, through it, and because you can choose a rejection road, and it's it's just the power of parents with children and the words that we say to them is often misunderstood, and you can be propelling them in a direction, and so it's that transition of, you know, handover to now you're going to be cycling on your own, and you're letting go before they know you're letting go, but doing more and more of that because they're going to have to cycle on their own. They're going to have to make these decisions on their own in their life.
So to give a quick summary before we conclude this and move on to the next block, it's having those relationships with your children. It's having those conversations with your children. That's sometimes I don't know how to talk about sex with my child.
Yeah.
Well, there's books out there which kind of let you allow you to start talking about it. It's empowering your children to make the right decisions. It is looking for things. It's learning about human trafficking, labor trafficking, and all that stuff, and looking out for certain things like this versus like, oh, that guy was a real possessive boyfriend, but it might be something more than that.
Yeah.
So it's really kind of empowering your children. It's having these conversations with children, and not just your children. I'm talking like even your friends who have children. It's just it's having the dialogue and being comfortable having the dialogue, and just continue to have the dialogue. So if that's it, I appreciate that, and I'm looking forward to the next topic that we go over.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.